Let her go. 2 words, flat, certain. From a kid who looked like he hadn't eaten a full meal in weeks. Gray hoodie, busted shoes, a backpack stuffed with everything he owned. 3 grown men, 1 knife already out. A parking garage at 10 o'clock at night with nobody coming to help. And this 17-year-old boy with cracked ribs and hollow cheeks stepped out of the shadows and put his body between a stranger's daughter and something she wouldn't have walked away from. He didn't know her name. He didn't ask for anything. When it was over, he just disappeared, bleeding into the dark. Nobody even knew he existed, until her father did. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The 3rd level of the Riverside parking garage on Clement Street was the kind of place that made people walk faster without knowing why. The fluorescent light above Bay 32 had been flickering for 6 weeks. Nobody from the city had come to fix it. Nobody ever did. On a Tuesday night in late October, that broken light cast everything in a pale, stuttering glow that made shadows move when they shouldn't have. Lily Williams was walking fast. She always walked fast in parking garages, even in the daytime. Her father had taught her that, don't linger, don't look at your phone, keep your keys between your fingers, always know where the exits are. She had grown up with a father who had seen the worst of people, and Mark Iron Hammer Williams had made sure his daughter never became someone's easy target. But tonight, Lily's mind was somewhere else entirely. She had her backpack slung over one shoulder, stuffed full of AP chemistry notes, and a dog-eared copy of Crime and Punishment that her English teacher had assigned 3 weeks ago, and that she had only gotten halfway through. Finals were in 6 days. She had been at the library until they locked the doors at 9:30. Now it was almost 10 o'clock, and all she wanted was to get to her car, drive home, eat whatever leftovers her dad had saved in the fridge, and sleep. She was 20 feet from her car when she heard the footsteps. They were the wrong kind of footsteps. Not the purposeful click of someone heading to their own vehicle. Not the casual shuffle of a stranger minding their business. These footsteps were slow, deliberate, matching her own pace exactly, and there was more than one set of them. Lily's hand found her keys inside her jacket pocket. She didn't turn around. Her father had told her that too. Don't let them know you're scared. Don't let them know you know. Hey, the voice came from behind her, low and thick, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who had already decided something. Where you going, sweetheart? Lily kept walking. Hey, I'm talking to you. She was 15 feet from her car. 12. 10. A hand grabbed the strap of her backpack and yanked her backwards so hard she nearly went off her feet. She spun around, and there they were. 3 men, none of them young. The one who had grabbed her was wide-shouldered, wearing a canvas jacket and construction boots. His face was red and shining. He was drunk. They all were. She could smell it from 3 feet away. The second one was leaning against a concrete pillar, grinning like this was the funniest thing that had happened to him all week. The third one was already moving around to her right side, cutting off any path to the stairwell. Give me your phone, the wide one said. I don't want any trouble, Lily said. Her voice stayed level. She was proud of that, even as her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her ears. Then don't make any. He took a step forward. She screamed. The sound ripped through the garage and bounced off every concrete wall and ceiling, and absolutely no one came. The grinning one laughed. The wide one stopped smiling. Bad idea, he said, reaching out and grabbing her arm. And then a voice came from the shadows to her left. Let her go. It was calm, not loud, not threatening in the theatrical way you'd expect from someone trying to play the hero. Just flat and certain, and utterly without fear, like someone stating a fact. All 3 men turned. The boy standing at the edge of the flickering light looked like exactly the wrong person to be making that kind of demand. He was maybe 17 years old, lean in the way that spoke of not enough food, and too much moving. Wearing a gray hoodie that had been washed so many times it had turned almost white. His jeans were dark with dried mud at the knees. On his back was a backpack so stuffed it looked like it might contain everything he owned, because as it turned out, it did. His face was sharp and angular, the kind of face that would have been handsome with a few more years and a few more meals on it. He had dark eyes that didn't blink, fixed on the three men with an expression that wasn't bravado, wasn't fear. It was something more unsettling than either. It was pure, quiet calculation. "Kid," the wide one said, releasing Lily's arm and turning to face him, with something between amusement and irritation. "You need to walk away right now." "I'm not going to do that," the boy said. "You know who you're talking to?" "Right now?" The boy set his backpack down against the wall without taking his eyes off the men. "Three people who are about to regret tonight a lot more than they already do." The wide one cracked his knuckles. "You got a death wish, boy?" "No," the boy said simply. "Do you?" The wide man moved first. He always moved first. That was the kind of man he was. He threw a right hook at the side of the boy's head, the kind of punch designed to end a conversation in one motion. It didn't land. The boy slipped it. Not the way you slip a punch in a boxing gym with padded gloves and a referee watching. He slipped it the way someone slips a punch when the alternative is dying, fast and economical and completely without hesitation, ducking under the arc of the fist and driving the heel of his palm upward into the man's sternum with a force that didn't look like it should have been possible from someone his size. The wide man made a sound like all the air had been suddenly removed from his body, which was essentially what had happened, and he staggered backward 3 steps, bent at the waist, fighting for breath. The second man, the one who had been grinning, stopped grinning. He came in from the left, faster and lower, going for a tackle. The boy pivoted, used the man's own momentum to redirect him into the concrete pillar with a crack that echoed through the whole level. The man went down and stayed down, clutching his shoulder, swearing through his teeth. 6 seconds. It had been 6 seconds. The third man, the one who had been circling, reached into his jacket. When his hand came out, there was a folding knife in it, the blade catching the stuttering light. Lily pressed herself against her car, unable to breathe. "Jake," she would say later, when she finally learned his name. He didn't even look scared. He looked focused, like this was a math problem he already knew how to solve. The man with the knife slashed outward, a wide arc meant to keep distance while he found an angle. The boy, Jake, stepped back once, twice, reading the rhythm. Then the man lunged and Jake moved inside the arc, got both hands on the knife hand, twisted with everything he had, and the knife clattered to the concrete floor. The man screamed and grabbed his wrist. Jake kicked the knife away into the shadows. Then he turned to Lily. "Get in your car," he said. His lip was split. His left eye was already starting to swell from where the first man, recovered now, had caught him with a glancing blow in the struggle. "Lock the door. Call 911. Don't come out until the police get here." "What about you?" "Go." She went. She threw herself into the driver's seat, hit the locks, and grabbed her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly, she had to try 3 times to unlock the screen. She dialed 911 and then turned to look through the rear windshield at what was happening, because she couldn't not look. The 2 men who were still standing were working together now, circling Jake from both sides, and the wide one had found a tire iron from somewhere, she didn't see where, and he was swinging it, and Jake was bleeding now, she could see that, bleeding from above his eyebrow and from his lip, but he kept moving, kept slipping the worst of it, kept making them pay for every inch they took. 911, what's your emergency? Parking garage, Clement Street, Riverside Structure, 3rd level. There's a fight. There are 3 men. They had a knife. There's a boy who is, her voice broke. Please hurry. Please. She watched the whole thing through the rear window, clutching the phone, whispering, come on, come on, come on, until the red and blue lights finally swam up the ramp and the men scattered, running, stumbling, vanishing into the stairwells and shadows like cockroaches from light. Lily was out of her car before the police cruiser fully stopped. Jake was on the ground, one hand braced against the concrete, trying to push himself up. His hoodie was torn at the shoulder. There was blood on the side of his face, on his chin, soaking into the collar of his shirt. She dropped to her knees beside him. "Don't move. You need an ambulance." "I'm fine," he said. His voice was steady. That was what shook her. After all of that, his voice was still steady. "You are absolutely not fine," she said. "I've been worse." He got his feet under him and stood, slowly, with a kind of careful deliberateness of someone taking inventory of their own damage. "Are you hurt?" "Am I?" She stared at him. "They didn't touch me because of you. Are you?" "I'm okay." He reached down and picked up his backpack. He checked the zipper on the front pocket, then slung it over his uninjured shoulder. The police officers were out of their car, hands on their belts, assessing the scene. One of them called out, "Everybody stay where you are." Jake looked at the officers, then back at Lily. Something shifted in his expression, something careful and quick. "Tell them what happened," he said quietly. "Tell them all of it. The knife. Tell them about the knife. It's over by the wall." "What are you doing? You need medical attention." "I need to go." He took a step back. "You just—" She grabbed his sleeve, and the desperation in her own voice surprised her. "You just saved my life. You can't just leave. What's your name? At least tell me your name." He looked at her for a long moment. In that light, with blood on his face and his hands and that impossibly calm expression, she thought she had never seen anyone look so alone in her entire life. "Jake," he said. "Jake what?" But he was already moving toward the far stairwell, the one the officers weren't blocking, his backpack bouncing against his shoulder, limping slightly but moving fast. And before she could say another word, he was gone. The officer's name was Detective Carla Reyes, and she had been on the job for 14 years, and she had seen a lot of things in parking garages on Clement Street. She had not seen this. "Describe him again," she said, her pen moving over her notepad. 17, maybe 18, tall, thin, gray hoodie, dark jeans. Lily paused. "He had a really big backpack, like everything he owns big." Reyes looked up from her notepad. "What makes you say that?" Lily thought about the way he had set that backpack down before the fight, carefully, against the wall, out of the way, like it was the most important thing there. Like whatever was inside it mattered more than what was about to happen to him. "Because of how he treated it," she said slowly, "like it was all he had." Reyes wrote something down. "And you said he refused medical attention and left before officers arrived?" "He left when he saw officers arriving." Lily looked at the detective. I think he was scared of getting in trouble. Or maybe," she stopped. "Maybe what?" "Maybe he just doesn't have anywhere for an ambulance to bill." Reyes studied her for a moment. Then she wrote something else down and closed her notebook. "We'll look into it," she said. Mark Williams got the call at 11:14 p.m. He was in the garage of his house on Wentworth Road, the door open, the old Harley up on the stand, doing what he always did when he couldn't sleep, which was keep his hands busy so his mind had less room to run. He was a big man, broad across the shoulders, with a gray beard trimmed close, and forearms covered in the kind of ink that told the whole story of his life if you knew how to read it. He had not been young for a long time. He had also not been soft for a very long time. His phone showed Lily's name, and he picked up before it rang twice. "Dad," her voice. He was already standing up straight. Parents learn the vocabulary of their children's voices the way musicians learn key changes. The slightest shift, and something in the body responds before the brain catches up. "What happened?" he said. It wasn't a question. She told him everything. It took 11 minutes. He didn't interrupt once, which was not like him. He was a man who interrupted, who had opinions about things, who processed by talking. But he listened to every single word his daughter said in silence, one hand pressed flat against the workbench, jaw tight. When she finished, there was a pause. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No, Dad. Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine. Because of him." Another pause. "Where are you right now?" "Still at the garage. The detective is here. She says I can go soon." "I'm coming to get you." "Dad, I have my car." "I'm coming to get you," he said again, quieter this time, and the quieter he got, the more she knew he meant it. "I'll send somebody for your car tomorrow. You're not driving tonight." He hung up and stood in the garage for 30 seconds with his phone in his hand. Then he walked to the door that connected the garage to the house and opened it and said, "Donna." His wife appeared in the kitchen doorway. She had been awake. She always was when Lily was out late. "Lily's okay," he said immediately. "She's okay." Donna Williams put a hand over her mouth. "Some kid stepped in," Mark said. "A homeless kid, from what she's saying. He took on 3 grown men with a knife and got Lily out of it and then walked away bleeding and wouldn't even give her his last name." Donna stared at him. A kid? 17, she thinks. And he just left? Without anything. Mark's jaw worked. "I'm going to find him." "Mark, I don't know where he is or what his story is or why he was in that parking garage at 10 o'clock at night with everything he owns on his back." He reached for his jacket. "But I'm going to find him, and when I do, I'm going to make sure he knows that what he did tonight meant something." His wife looked at him for a long moment, the way she had looked at him for 22 years of marriage, the way that said she knew exactly who he was and had made her peace with it. "Call Bobby and Ray," she said. "Don't go alone." He didn't go alone. By midnight, the parking garage on Clement Street had 7 Harleys parked on its first level, and the kind of presence that made the 2 remaining squad cars give them a respectful amount of room. Hammer stood in the spot where, based on Lily's description, the fight had happened. There was dried blood on the concrete. The tire iron was still there, near the wall, tagged with evidence tape. He was standing here, Hammer said, half to himself, half to the men behind him. 3 on 1, knife in the mix. He crouched down, looked at the blood on the floor without touching it. "Kid weighs what, $140 soaking wet?" "Lily said he moved like he'd been trained," said Bobby Anchor Torres, the club's vice president, arms folded across his chest. "Like it wasn't the first time." "Or the 10th, said Ray Socket Delgado. He was studying the walls, the sight lines, the corners. "This level, there's spots here where someone could set up for the night, out of the camera angles. Off to the left, behind the pillars." He looked at Hammer. "You think he's been staying here?" Hammer stood up. "Find out." They found his spot in under 10 minutes, behind a utility service door on the 3rd level that had been left with a broken latch. Nothing dramatic, just a gap in the wall where the door didn't fully close anymore. There was a space barely large enough to lie down in. Ray found it because he had grown up in neighborhoods where you learned to spot the places people disappear to, and this one had all the signs. Inside that space, there was a sleeping bag rolled tight, a plastic bin with a lid, a phone charger coiled around itself, a stack of library books, 4 of them, held together with a bungee cord, their spines facing up, Linear Algebra and its Applications, The Art of Problem Solving, Volume 2, The Making of the Atomic Bomb, Crime and Punishment. Ray crouched down and picked up the top book, opened it to a random page. The margins were full of handwriting, tiny, cramped, so dense it covered every available white space. Notes, questions, connections drawn ideas with little arrows. He held the book up for Hammer to see. Hammer looked at it for a long time without saying anything. Then he said quietly, "Who is this kid?" Nobody answered because nobody knew. But every man in that garage felt the same thing at the same moment. The weight of a question that suddenly mattered more than almost anything else they had encountered in a very long time. Somewhere in this city, a 17-year-old boy with broken ribs and a split lip and a backpack full of advanced mathematics textbooks was alone in the dark. He had just done something extraordinary. He had done it for a stranger. He had asked for nothing. He had taken nothing. He had simply walked away, bleeding, into a night that had no room for him, and nobody had even thought to ask if he needed somewhere to go. "We find him," Hammer said. He looked around at the men behind him, men he had ridden with for 20 years, men who had seen the inside of county lockups and hospital rooms and courtrooms, men who understood what it meant to have nothing and to keep going anyway. Tonight, tomorrow, however long it takes, we find him, and we do right by him. Bobby nodded. Ray nodded. One by one, every man in that garage nodded. Not because they had been ordered to, because they had seen the books. They had seen the margins. They had seen the sleeping bag rolled neat as a soldier's kit, left ready for someone who might need to move at a moment's notice. They had seen the life of a boy who had been given nothing and was still, somehow, trying to become everything. And that was something none of them could walk away from. He was out there tonight, 17 years old, bleeding and alone, carrying everything he had on his back. And not one person in this city knew his last name. That was about to change. Jake Reynolds had a system. Most people who had never been homeless imagined it as chaos, wandering, desperate, reactive. Jake had learned in the first 3 weeks on his own that chaos was what killed you. Chaos meant you got caught sleeping somewhere you shouldn't. Chaos meant you forgot to charge your phone and missed the library's free tutoring session. Chaos meant you ate nothing for 2 days because you spent your last $8 on something that felt urgent in the moment but wasn't. Chaos was the enemy. Structure was survival. So he had a system. He woke at 5:30 every morning before the garage started filling up with commuters. He had 30 minutes to pack everything, wipe down the space so no one could tell he had been there, and get out before the first attendant made his rounds. He knew which gym on 4th Street offered a $7 day pass and had a bathroom with a working lock on the door. He knew the library opened at 8 on weekdays and 9 on weekends. He knew the soup kitchen on Marsh Avenue served until 10:15, but that if you arrived after 9:50, you got the bottom of the pot, which was always lukewarm and always too salty. He knew all of it. He had mapped this city the way a navigator maps unfamiliar water, one careful mile at a time, learning where the rocks were before they could tear you apart. Tonight, the system had broken. He had taken the back stairwell out of the garage, the one that led out onto a service alley off Clement, and he had walked 6 blocks without stopping. Not because he had somewhere to go, but because movement was safer than standing still when you were bleeding and didn't know if the men you'd left on the ground had friends nearby. His ribs screamed with every step. The cut above his eyebrow had stopped bleeding, but had tightened into a throb that pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. His left hand was swollen at the knuckle where it had caught the edge of the tire iron on a block that hadn't been quite fast enough. He stopped in a doorway on Ansel Street and unzipped the front pocket of his backpack with his good hand. Inside, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag to keep it dry, was a first aid kit the size of a paperback novel. He had assembled it himself over 3 months, piece by piece. Antiseptic wipes from a dollar store, butterfly closures from a pharmacy clearance bin, a small roll of athletic tape, 2 ibuprofen tablets sealed in a Ziploc bag that he had been saving for exactly this kind of emergency. He cleaned the cut above his eye standing in that doorway, jaw set against the sting, working by feel and by the thin light of his phone screen propped against his bag. He pressed a butterfly closure over it. He took both ibuprofen. He wrapped his swollen hand in 2 loops of athletic tape, not tight enough to cut circulation, just tight enough to give it something to push against. Then he sat down on the cold ground with his back against the door and let himself have exactly 60 seconds of not being okay. He had learned that too. You didn't suppress it entirely. That was how you broke down at the wrong moment. You gave yourself a minute. You felt it, all of it. The fear that had been there the whole time underneath the calm. The pain that his adrenaline had been drowning out. The loneliness that was always there, always, like a low note under everything else. You felt all of it for 60 seconds. And then you packed it back up and you kept moving. He thought about the girl, Lily. He hadn't known her name when he stepped out of the shadows. He had just seen what was happening and done what needed doing, the same way you'd grab someone's arm if they were about to step in front of a car. It wasn't heroism. It was just the only thing that made sense. But now, sitting in that doorway with his ribs aching and his hand throbbing and 60 seconds ticking down in his head, he let himself think about the look on her face when she had grabbed his sleeve. The way her voice had cracked when she said, "You just saved my life." Nobody had looked at him like that in a very long time. Nobody had looked at him like he mattered in a very long time. 60 seconds. He stood up, slung the backpack over his shoulder, and started walking. He couldn't go back to the garage tonight. The police would be there, and even when the police were on your side, they were never entirely on your side when you were a 17-year-old with no address and no guardian. Questions led to systems, and systems led to people making decisions about your life that you hadn't agreed to. He had been through that before. He was not going through it again. He knew a spot under the Greenway overpass on Route 9 where 3 other people slept rough. A woman named Carol, who was 58 and had lost her apartment when her landlord sold the building, and 2 men, brothers, who had been living outside for almost 2 years. They weren't his friends exactly, but they weren't strangers either. They watched out for each other in the specific and limited way that people who are surviving tend to do. You didn't take from each other. You shared information. And if someone didn't show up for 3 days in a row, you noticed. He was 40 minutes away on foot. His ribs made every step a negotiation. But he started walking because that was what you did. You kept moving. You dealt with what was in front of you. You didn't look too far ahead because too far ahead was MIT and full scholarships that had fallen through and the specific grief of knowing exactly what you were capable of and having absolutely no way to get there. Too far ahead would break you. You looked at the next 40 minutes and then the next, and that was how you survived. He was 20 minutes into the walk, moving down the side of Birch Avenue with his head down and his collar up against the wind, when a car slowed beside him. He didn't stop walking. He had learned not to stop. "Jake." He stopped. The window of the patrol car was down. Detective Reyes was looking at him from the driver's seat, her elbow on the door, her expression carrying the careful neutrality of someone who had already decided something but hadn't told you yet. "I'd rather you didn't run," she said, "because frankly, I'm tired, and I think you are too." Jake's whole body had gone taut the moment the car slowed. Every muscle, every nerve, everything pointed at the gap between the parked cars on his right and the question of whether his ribs would let him run fast enough to matter. He did the calculation in approximately 1 second and arrived at the same answer she had. "I'm not running," he said. "Good, get in. I'll give you a ride." "I'm fine walking." "You're limping," she said, "and that butterfly closure above your eye is not going to hold if you keep walking in this wind." She studied him. "I'm not taking you anywhere official, Jake. I just want to talk. You can stay in the car or get out at any light you choose. That's not a trick. That's just true." He stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, weighing it. He was very good at reading people. Years of navigating foster homes and group houses and the specific politics of survival had built in him a nearly automatic sensor for when adults were telling the truth and when they weren't. Detective Reyes, as best he could tell, was telling the truth. He got in the car. She handed him a water bottle from the cup holder before she even pulled away from the curb. He took it and drank half of it without meaning to, and that told him more about how dehydrated he was than he had realized. "You want to tell me about tonight?" she said. "I think you already know about tonight." "I know what Lily told me. I want to hear your version." "Her version is probably accurate," he said. She seemed like a careful observer. Reyes almost smiled at that, then didn't. "3 men, one of them with a knife, and you intervened. You disarmed the one with the knife. You took a significant amount of physical damage in the process." She glanced over at him. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Jake looked out the window. "Here and there." "That's not a real answer." "No," he agreed. She let the silence ride for a block. Then, "The gym on 4th Street, Martinez's place. He told me about 6 months ago that he had a kid coming in on a day pass twice a week who was the most naturally gifted fighter he'd ever seen at that age. Didn't take instruction well, but learned by watching. Spent more time watching than hitting." She paused. "He said the kid always looked like he was doing math in his head." Jake said nothing. "That you?" she asked. Still nothing. "Here's what I know, Jake. I know you don't have a permanent address. I know you're a minor, which means technically I have obligations, but I also know that whatever I do tonight has consequences, and I'd rather make a decision with more information than less." She turned onto the wider road that ran parallel to Route 9. "So I'm asking you straight. How old are you? Where are you from? And is there anyone who knows where you are tonight?" The question hung in the car. Jake turned the water bottle in his hands, around and around, thinking about what to give her and what to keep. 17, he said finally. "I aged out of the foster system in Mercer County 8 months ago. They said 18, but my caseworker retired and someone filed the wrong date, and it happened early. I appealed it. Lost." He said it the way you'd describe a weather event, factually, without self-pity, because self-pity was a luxury he had decided he couldn't afford. "No living relatives. The system tried to place me in a group home, but the group home had a different address than the one on file, and by the time I found out, I had already missed the enrollment window for my school, and I wasn't going to lose my school." He paused. "So I found another way." Reyes was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. "You have a school?" "Jefferson High. I'm a senior." He looked at her. "I have a 4.0. I have an acceptance letter from MIT that I'm trying to figure out how to afford. I take the 38 bus in the morning, and I do my homework at the library, and I stay at the garage on Clement most nights because it's dry, and the latch on the service door is broken, and nobody's bothered to fix it in 2 months." He said it all in a row, level and quiet, because he needed her to understand something. "I am not a problem that needs to be solved. I am a person who has a plan. I just need to stay out of the system long enough for the plan to work." The car was stopped at a red light. Reyes had her hands on the wheel, and she was staring straight ahead. And Jake could see something moving in her face. Not pity exactly, which was what he feared most, but something more complicated than that. Something that looked almost like anger, not at him, at the shape of things. "MIT, she said quietly. "Yes. You were accepted. Last March." She turned to look at him. "And you've been living in a parking garage since—" "A car before that. The garage is actually better. It's dry and there's more security lighting, which sounds counterintuitive, but it means fewer people coming around." Reyes said a word under her breath that was not appropriate for a detective on duty. And then she said, "Okay, I'm going to tell you something, Jake, and I need you to really hear it." She turned to face him fully. "What you did tonight, what you did for that girl, that kind of thing has a way of setting things in motion that can't be stopped. Lily Williams is not just anybody. Her father," she paused, choosing her words, "her father has resources, and he has loyalty, and when someone does something for one of his own, he doesn't forget. Ever." Jake frowned slightly. "I don't want anything from him." "I know you don't," she said. "That's kind of the point." She drove him the rest of the way to the Greenway without another word, and when she pulled up to let him out, she reached into the back seat and handed him a brown paper bag. He opened it. Sandwich, apple, 2 granola bars, a small thing of orange juice. "From the break room," she said. "Nobody's going to miss it." He looked at the bag for a moment, then he looked at her. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I have a son your age," she said simply, "and because you did the right thing tonight when you didn't have to, and because the system failed you, and I'm part of the system, and sometimes the only thing you can do with that is buy someone a sandwich." She put the car in park. "I'm going to give you my card. If anything happens, anything, you call me. Not the main line, my cell number on the back. You understand?" He took the card. He read both numbers. He memorized them because he always memorized important numbers, and put the card in the front pocket of his backpack, the same place he kept his acceptance letter and his birth certificate and the photograph of his mother that was creased down the middle from being folded and unfolded so many times. "Thank you," he said. He was not a person who said that easily, which was why when he said it, he meant it completely. She nodded. "Get some sleep, Jake." He got out of the car. She waited until he had crossed under the overpass, and Carol's voice, dry and familiar, had called out, "Who's there?" And he had called back, "It's Jake." And she had said, "You're late and you look terrible." She waited until she heard that, and then she drove away. Carol was 68, not 58, though she never corrected anyone. She was a large woman with short, silver hair and reading glasses that she wore pushed up on her forehead at all times, even though she had lost the prescription lenses and was now just wearing the frames. She had been a high school librarian for 31 years. She had opinions about everything, and she shared all of them freely. And she had taken one look at Jake Reynolds the first night he showed up under this overpass, soaking wet and trying not to show it, and she had said, "You're too young for this. What are you reading?" And when he had pulled out the linear algebra textbook from his bag, her face had gone through several expressions in quick succession, and finally settled on something that looked like relief, like she had found in the middle of all this something to make sense of. She examined his face now the way a librarian examines a damaged book, thoroughly, without sentiment. "How many?" "3. "Knife?" "One of them, yeah. And you're still walking, so I'll assume you handled it." She handed him a blanket from her own pile. She had 3, which was more than most, which was why she was also the one people came to when it was cold. "Sit down before you fall down. You're gray." He sat. He ate the sandwich in 4 bites because he hadn't eaten since noon, and adrenaline had burned through everything. He drank the orange juice. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes and let his ribs hurt without fighting them, because fighting them took energy he didn't have. "Jake," Carol said. What happened tonight? And don't say nothing." He told her. He kept it short, the way he kept everything. The edited version that covered the facts without the undertow of emotion. Girl in danger, 3 men, he stepped in. She got away, police came, he left. Carol was quiet when he finished. Then she said, "Was she okay? The girl?" "She was okay." "And you let the police handle it?" "I let the police arrive while I was somewhere else." Carol made a noise that wasn't quite disapproving and wasn't quite understanding. The specific noise of someone who had lived long enough to know that the rules don't always work the way they're supposed to, and that sometimes the people the rules were designed to protect were the ones they hurt the most. "You should have stayed," she said, but she said it quietly, without force. "I know," he said, and the thing was, he did know. He knew that staying would have been the cleaner thing, the right thing by the official measure of it. But he also knew that staying meant questions, and questions meant systems, and systems meant people with clipboards deciding that a 17-year-old with no address was a problem to be solved, and not a person with a plan. And he had worked too hard, survived too much, held himself together with too much pure, determined will to let a clipboard take it away from him now. 3 weeks. That was all he needed. 3 more weeks and he would be 18, legally an adult, and the question of guardianship and group homes became moot. 3 more weeks and the financial aid appeal he had filed with MIT's Office of Student Services would have a decision. He had written that appeal himself, 12 pages, documented everything, the foster care records, the aging out error, the gap in housing support, his academic transcript, 3 letters of recommendation from teachers who didn't know he was homeless but knew he was extraordinary. He had used the library printer. He had mailed it certified. He had done everything right. He just needed 3 more weeks for it to matter. He pulled his backpack against his chest and felt through the fabric for the specific hardness of the folder inside. The one with the letter, the transcript, the photograph. It was all there. It was always all there. Somewhere across the city, in a house on Wentworth Road, Mark Williams was getting off the phone with Bobby Torres and staring at a photograph his daughter had sent him. A grainy still from the parking garage security camera that Detective Reyes had, in a quiet act of professional generosity, forwarded to Lily's phone before officially logging it into evidence. The image was blurry. The boy in the hoodie was barely more than a shape, but you could see the backpack. You could see the way he was standing, squarely, evenly, positioned between the men and the girl, with the particular stillness of someone who had already decided what they were going to do and was simply waiting for the right moment to do it. Hammer stared at that image for a long time. His wife had gone to bed. The house was quiet around him. Outside, the wind was picking up, the kind of cold October wind that found every gap in every wall. 3 weeks, Reyes had said to him on the phone, when he had called her directly after Lily gave him the number. He told me 3 weeks. That's how close he is. Close to what? To not needing any of us, she said. And then, after a pause, the problem is, 3 weeks is a long time to be sleeping outside with cracked ribs. Hammer put his phone down on the workbench and looked at the image again. The boy in the shadows. The boy who had stepped forward when every reasonable instinct would have told him to step back. The boy with everything he owned on his back and calculus in the margins of every book he read. Bobby, he said. Bobby Torres had been standing in the doorway for the last 5 minutes because Bobby always knew when to show up without being told. Yeah, boss. Tomorrow morning, everybody, we're going to find this kid before he finds a reason to disappear again. Bobby was quiet for a moment. You think he'll run? Hammer thought about it. He thought about the careful way the sleeping bag had been rolled, about the first aid kit assembled piece by piece from clearance bins, about the appeal letter that Reyes had described, 12 pages, certified mail, documented down to the last detail. He thought about a boy who had spent a year and a half outwitting every system designed to catch him, and had done it not by being reckless, but by being smarter than everyone who was supposed to be helping him. He won't run, Hammer said finally. He'll be at his school. At 8 o'clock in the morning, on a bus, with his calculus homework done, like nothing happened. He almost smiled, and there was something in it. Not amusement exactly, but recognition. The recognition of a man who had also, in a different life, refused to let the world see him struggle. Because that's who he is. Bobby nodded slowly. Then we meet him there. Then we meet him there, Hammer agreed. He folded the photograph in half and put it in his jacket pocket, against his chest, the way you carry something that matters. And this time, we make sure he knows he doesn't have to carry all of this alone. He was on the 38 bus at 7:43 in the morning, exactly like Hammer had predicted. Jake sat in the back row with his backpack between his feet and his calculus textbook open on his lap, and anyone who looked at him would have seen a lean, quiet teenager doing homework on his commute to school. They would not have seen the 2 butterfly closures above his left eye because he had his hood up. They would not have seen the way he shifted his weight every time the bus hit a pothole because he had trained himself not to flinch at pain in public. They would not have seen the exhaustion, the deep, structural kind that sleep doesn't fully fix, because he had trained himself not to show that either. What they might have noticed, if they were paying attention, was that the homework he was doing was not the kind of homework most high school seniors did. The problem set open on the right page of his textbook was from a graduate-level linear algebra course he had found online, one offered freely by MIT's OpenCourseWare program. He had been working through it for 3 months, not because anyone required it of him, not because it earned him any grade, but because he needed to be ready. When he got there, and he would get there, he had decided that a long time ago, with the specific finality of someone making a promise to a person who was no longer alive to hear it, he needed to arrive as someone who had not wasted a single day of waiting. His mother had used to say that, "Don't waste the waiting, baby." She had said it from a hospital bed in the last 6 months of her life, with tubes in her arm and a paperback novel propped on her knees, still reading, still learning, still absolutely refusing to treat the time she had left as anything other than time she intended to use. Sarah Reynolds had been 39 years old when the cancer found her. She had been a cashier at a grocery store and a part-time student at the community college who had been 2 semesters away from an associate's degree in computer science when she got sick. She had never stopped being curious. She had passed that on to her son like a genetic trait, and Jake carried it the way he carried her photograph, close and carefully, and with a ferocity that had no name. He got off at the Jefferson High stop at 8:02 and walked through the front entrance without looking back. He did not know that Bobby Torres was parked across the street in a black pickup truck, watching. He did not know that Bobby had his phone to his ear saying quietly, "He's here. Gray hoodie, black backpack, just went inside." He did not know that on the other end of that call, Hammer Williams was already driving toward the school. He did not know any of it. He went to first period. He sat in the 3rd row. He took notes in the margins of his notebook in the same tight, dense handwriting that filled the margins of every book he owned. And when Mr. Patterson asked a question about vector transformations that stumped the rest of the class, Jake answered it without looking up from his page, because the answer was obvious to him, had been obvious since he was 14 years old and first understood what mathematics actually was. Not a subject, not a set of rules, but a language. The one language in the world that meant exactly what it said and nothing else. Between 2nd and 3rd period, in the hallway outside the chemistry lab, someone said his name. He turned around and there was Lily Williams. She was standing 6 feet away with her hands wrapped around a paper coffee cup, and she looked like she had slept about as well as he had, which was to say, not well at all. Her eyes were red at the edges. When she saw him, saw the butterfly closure, saw the way he was holding himself slightly to the left to keep weight off his right side, something moved across her face that was too complicated to name all at once. "You're here," she said. "I go to school here," he said carefully. "I know. I asked the office. I said you were a friend who I needed to return a book to." She paused. "They told me you were in Mr. Patterson's first period class." Another pause. "I've been at this school for 2 years, Jake. I've never seen you before." "I tend not to be very visible," he said. "That seems intentional." "It is." They stood in the hallway while the current of students moved around them, and the bell warning was 30 seconds away, and Jake was calculating exits the same way he always calculated exits. Not because he wanted to leave, but because he needed to know where they were. "How are your ribs?" she asked. "Fine." "That's not what fine looks like." "I know what my ribs feel like better than you do." "Probably," she said, "but I have a father who used to wrap his own broken ribs with athletic tape rather than go to a hospital. And I know what that particular kind of fine looks like, and it's exactly like you look right now." She stepped forward and held out the coffee cup. "It's black. I didn't know how you take it." He looked at the cup. He looked at her. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you did something for me last night that I can't repay," she said simply, "and this is the only thing I can do right now that makes any sense." He took the cup. "Thank you." My dad wants to meet you." There it was. Jake took a slow breath through his nose, which was a mistake because his ribs made him pay for it. "I appreciate that, but he doesn't need to." "That's not really how my father operates," Lily said, and there was something in her voice that was wry and warm and slightly resigned, the specific tone of someone who loves a person exactly as they are, while also being very clear-eyed about who that person is. "He's already looking for you. He won't find me. He found your sleeping spot in the garage last night," she said quietly. Jake went absolutely still. "He found the books," she said. "He found the sleeping bag. Bobby Torres read your margin notes and apparently couldn't stop talking about them." She looked at him steadily. "Jake, my dad is a lot of things, but he doesn't do anything halfway. And when he decides someone matters, that person doesn't get a vote about whether they matter. That's just who he is." The warning bell rang. Around them, the hallway thinned. "I have to get to class," Jake said. "I know." She didn't move. "He's outside right now. Not to pressure you, not to make a scene. He wanted to see where you go to school. He wanted to see that you're real." Her voice dropped slightly on the last word, and Jake understood what she meant without her having to explain it. Because sometimes the only way the people who love you know how to process something that scared them is to see the thing that made it okay. "He'll wait until school's out if you want him to. He'll wait a week if that's what you need. But Jake," she met his eyes, "he's not going to walk away." Jake said nothing for a long moment. The hallway was empty now. He was going to be late for third period, which was something he had not been since September. "What does he know?" he asked. "About me?" "He knows you're homeless," she said. "He knows you're 17. He knows you got accepted to MIT. She paused. "He knows about your mom." Jake's jaw tightened. "How does he know about my mom?" "Detective Reyes." He filed that away. The understanding that information moved faster than he did, always had, and that the careful walls he built around the facts of his own life were never as solid as he needed them to be. He felt something that was not quite anger and not quite fear, more like the specific vulnerability of a person who has been private for so long that being known feels like something is being taken. "All right," he said. The words came out flat and quiet. "Tell him I'll talk to him, after school. Not here, the diner on Clement, the one on the corner, 4 o'clock. He picked up his backpack. "And tell him to come alone, not the whole club, just him." Lily almost smiled. "He's not going to like the just him part." "I know," Jake said. "Tell him anyway." He turned and walked to class, and he did not look back. And the coffee from the cup she had given him was still warm in his hand. And that small, specific warmth was the thing he carried with him through third period and fourth, and the 40 minutes of lunch he spent in the library doing problem sets, because it was easier to focus on mathematics than on the fact that for the first time in 18 months, someone was coming to meet him who was not a social worker or a case manager or a person with a clipboard deciding his fate. Someone was coming because they wanted to, because they thought he mattered. He was not going to let himself feel that yet. It was too early to feel that. Mark Williams did not like the just him part. "He's 17 years old," Bobby said very carefully, "and he watched 3 men try to take his territory out from under him last night and handled it alone. And now the first move he makes is to negotiate the terms of the meeting." Bobby paused. "Hammer, I'm saying this with love. This kid is more like you at 22 than you probably want to admit." Hammer stared at him. "I'm just saying," Bobby said. "You're going to be real quiet for the next few minutes," Hammer told him. But he went alone. He drove himself to the diner on Clement in his personal truck. No cut, no vest, just jeans and a flannel shirt, and the gray in his beard. And he sat in the booth in the back at 3:50, and he ordered 2 coffees, and he waited. Jake walked in at 4 o'clock on the dot. Not a minute early, not a minute late. He stood in the doorway for a moment before he came in, scanning, assessing, making sure of the exits, making sure of who was there. And Hammer recognized the behavior because he had done it himself for 20 years of walking into rooms where you couldn't be certain of everything. He had just never seen it in a 17-year-old kid in a worn gray hoodie. Jake sat down across from him. He put his backpack on the seat beside him rather than on the floor, which Hammer understood immediately. "Jake Reynolds," Hammer said. "Mr. Williams," Jake said. "Mark." He pushed one of the coffees across the table. Or Hammer, if you're comfortable with it. Most people are. Jake looked at the coffee. He looked at the man across from him. Mark Williams was large in the way that men are large when they've spent a lifetime working physical jobs and living physical lives. Not gym-built, but earned. His hands on the table were scarred and calloused and completely still, and his eyes were gray and direct and doing the same thing Jake's eyes were always doing, which was reading everything in the room at the same time. "You have a daughter who means everything to you," Jake said, "and something almost happened to her last night. I get why you're here. I don't need anything from you, but I understand why you came." Hammer was quiet for a moment. "She told me you said that, pretty much word for word. Then I'll say something she didn't tell you." Jake wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. "I've had people want to help me before. Social workers, teachers, a foster family in Mercer County who meant well and then got overwhelmed and meant well from farther and farther away until they were just a signature on a form. I'm not saying you're any of those things. I'm saying I've learned that wanting to help and being able to help are two different things, and that the space between them is where people like me tend to get hurt the most." He paused. "So I'll talk to you, but I need you to be honest with me, not kind, honest." Hammer looked at this boy, this thin, battered, exhausted, razor-sharp boy, and felt something move through him that was not pity and was not admiration and was not anything simple enough to name. It was closer to recognition. The recognition of someone who had also, a long time ago, been the kind of person who walked into rooms alone and scanned for exits and trusted the math more than the people. "That's fair," Hammer said. "Okay." Jake held his gaze. "Then honestly, why are you here? Not because Lily told you to find me, the real reason." Hammer was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a car passed. The waitress refilled someone's water 2 tables over. The diner made its small sounds around them. "Because I looked at the books in that storage space last night," Hammer said finally. "I looked at the margins. Bobby couldn't read half of it. Too technical," he said, "but I could see what it was. I could see that every page of every book you own has been worked through. Not just read, worked through, like you were in a conversation with it." He paused, and I thought about a 17-year-old kid sitting in a parking garage at night, by flashlight, having a conversation with advanced mathematics, while the rest of us were asleep in our beds and had no idea. His voice stayed level, but something underneath it didn't. And I thought about my daughter, and I thought, if I have any right to sit in a warm house and sleep in a real bed and call myself a man who stands for something, then I have an obligation to show up for this. Not because you asked me to, because it's right. The table was quiet. Jake looked at the coffee cup in his hands for a long time. When he looked up, something in his face was different. Not open exactly, but less closed. The way a door looks when the lock has been turned back, but the handle hasn't been touched yet. "I have 3 weeks," he said. "Reyes told me. My appeal to MIT is pending. If it comes through, the aid covers tuition and housing. If it doesn't," he stopped. "I have a backup plan." "What's the backup plan?" "Community college for 2 years while I reapply." "That's not a backup plan," Hammer said quietly. "That's a punishment." Jake blinked. "It's practical. It's what you settled for because nobody was sitting across from you telling you you didn't have to settle." Hammer leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I'm not here to give you a handout, Jake. I'm not here to be your charity project or to make myself feel good about something. I'm here because my daughter is alive tonight because of you. And in my world, that creates a debt, and I pay my debts." He paused. MIT. What do you need? Not what you're hoping for. What do you actually need, start to finish, to walk onto that campus in September? Jake stared at him. Tuition, housing deposit, transportation, books, first month's expenses, Hammer continued. What's the number? You can't. I didn't ask if I could. I asked what the number was. Jake's throat moved. He looked down at the table. When he looked back up, his eyes were very still. The way eyes get when someone is working extremely hard to keep the surface of themselves calm because what is underneath is too big to let out in a diner on Clement Street at 4 in the afternoon. 15,000, he said, give or take, if the appeal doesn't cover everything. Okay, Hammer said, that's not a small amount of money. No, Hammer agreed. It's not. He picked up his coffee. It's also not 15 years of your life, which is what you lose if you go to community college and reapply and let the window close. Those two things are not the same size, Jake, even though right now they probably feel like they are. Jake said nothing. His jaw was tight. His hands were tight around the cup. Everything about him was tight, coiled, braced against the possibility of wanting this too much and having it disappear. Because that was the specific injury that life had given him most. Not the absence of good things, but the arrival of them followed by the removal. And the second time always hurt worse than the first. I'm going to make some calls tonight, Hammer said. Not to do anything, just to see what's possible. And tomorrow, I'd like you to sit down with me and my wife and tell us everything. The appeal, the numbers, the timeline, all of it. Not because we're taking over, because we need to know the shape of it before we can figure out how to help. He paused. And tonight, you're not sleeping in a parking garage. Jake opened his mouth. I have a guest room, Hammer said. It has a door that locks from the inside. You don't have to talk to anyone. You don't have to do anything. You just sleep in a real bed and eat a real meal and let those ribs start healing properly. He looked directly at him. I'm not asking you to trust me yet. I'm asking you to not sleep on a concrete floor with cracked ribs when there's a real bed 20 minutes away. That's all. The diner was quiet around them. Jake Reynolds sat with a cup of coffee he hadn't drunk and the weight of 18 months of absolute solitude on his shoulders. And across from him, a man with scarred hands and gray eyes was waiting with the specific patience of someone who already knew the answer, but understood that the person across from them needed time to arrive at it themselves. Jake looked at the table. He looked at the window. He looked at his backpack on the seat beside him, the one with the acceptance letter inside it, and the photograph of his mother, and Detective Reyes's card, and the appeal that he had written 12 pages of and mailed certified and was still waiting on an answer for. Don't waste the waiting, baby. Okay, he said quietly. Hammer nodded. Just once. Finish your coffee, he said. And for the first time in 18 months, Jake Reynolds let someone else hold the weight of the next hour. Just for 1 hour, just enough to breathe. He drank the coffee. It was hot, and it was real. And outside the diner window, the city moved through its late afternoon as if nothing had changed. But something had. Something had shifted in the particular way that things shift when a door that has been locked for a very long time is finally, carefully, opened from the inside. Neither of them said anything else for a while. They didn't need to. Some things don't need words. Some things just need two people sitting in a diner, drinking coffee, deciding to trust the next 5 minutes. And then the 5 after that. And then the 5 after that. The guest room at the Williams house had a window that faced the backyard, a bed with a real mattress, and a door that locked from the inside exactly like Hammer had promised. Jake checked the lock 3 times before he sat on the edge of the bed. Not because he didn't trust the man, but because 18 months of sleeping in places where anyone could walk in at any moment had rewired something in him at a level below conscious thought. And the brain does not unlearn survival overnight just because the situation has changed. He checked the lock. He noted the window as a secondary exit. He set his backpack on the floor within arm's reach and kept his shoes on for 20 minutes before he finally, slowly, untied them and set them beside the bed in a specific way. Heels together, toes out, positioned so he could step into them in the dark without fumbling. Then he lay back on the mattress and stared at the ceiling, and the mattress was so different from a sleeping bag on concrete that it almost felt wrong, the way too much of something good feels after you've gone without. He did not sleep for a long time. He lay there and listened to the sounds of the house. Donna Williams moving in the kitchen, the low murmur of the television in the living room, a door opening and closing somewhere, the particular creak of a house that has been lived in for years and carries the weight of a family in its walls. Small, ordinary sounds. The sounds of a life that had structure and warmth and people in it who knew each other's names. He had not heard sounds like that since the apartment on Grover Street 3 years ago, when his mother was still alive and still filling every room she was in with the specific energy of a person who refused to give up. He had not let himself miss it since then, or not more than he could manage, because missing things you couldn't have was a luxury the same way self-pity was a luxury, and he had budgeted himself strictly against both. But lying in that bed in the dark, surrounded by the sounds of the Williams house, the thing he had been holding back for 3 years moved against the walls he'd built around it, and he pressed the heel of his hand against his eyes and breathed slowly through his nose until it passed. He thought about his mother. He thought about the way she had looked in the last months, smaller than she should have been, but brighter somehow, like whatever was leaving her body was also burning off everything unnecessary and leaving only the essential. She had been the most essential person he had ever known. She had looked at him 2 weeks before she died and said, "Jake, you are the best thing I ever did. Don't let the world talk you out of that." He had been 14 years old. He had nodded and held her hand and not cried until he was outside the room, in the hospital corridor, where he sat on the floor against the wall for 45 minutes while people stepped carefully around him. He had not cried since. Not once. He had decided, sitting on that floor, that grief was real and permanent and had to be lived with, but that drowning in it was something his mother would have considered a waste of time. So he carried it with him the way you carry something heavy, steadily, efficiently, without putting it down, because the moment you put it down, you might not be able to pick it back up again. His phone vibrated on the nightstand. He picked it up. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "Jake, this is Donna Williams. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry. No obligation. The light above the stove stays on all night. D." He stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, "Thank you." And after a pause, because it was the honest thing, "I might take you up on that." 3 minutes later, he was in the kitchen. Donna Williams was a small woman with sharp eyes and the specific, quiet competence of someone who had been running things for a long time without needing anyone to notice. She was at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a book, and when Jake came in, she looked up and did not make a fuss about it, which was exactly the right response. "Sit down," she said. "There's soup on the stove. It's the real kind. I made it this afternoon. Bowls are in the cabinet to the left of the sink." He served himself. He sat down across from her. He ate and she read her book, and the silence between them was not uncomfortable, which surprised him. After a while, she said without looking up, "Mark told me about your mother." Jake's spoon stopped. "She sounds like she was remarkable," Donna said simply, and went back to her book. He sat with that for a moment. Then he started eating again. "She was," he said. "Tell me something about her, not the hard part, something good." He thought about it. "She used to read the dictionary," he said, "not from the beginning, just randomly. She'd open it to any page and read definitions and etymology, and she'd get so interested she'd be there for an hour. She said English was the most chaotic language ever invented, and she found that deeply amusing. He paused. She used to say that whoever invented the word defenestrate, which means to throw something out a window, was a person with very specific problems, and she respected them enormously. Donna Williams laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised out of her, and it changed her whole face. "I like her," she said. "Yeah," Jake said. She was easy to like. They sat in the kitchen for another half hour, and Donna didn't push for anything more, and Jake didn't offer anything more, and when he finally went back to the guest room, he fell asleep within 10 minutes, which was faster than he had fallen asleep in longer than he could remember. His shoes were still by the bed. His backpack was still within arm's reach, but something in him had unclenched, just slightly, just enough. He did not check the lock a fourth time. In the morning, the kitchen smelled like coffee and eggs, and Bobby Torres was sitting at the table. Jake stopped in the doorway. Bobby held up both hands, palms out, the universal gesture of non-aggression. "I'm not here officially," he said. "I'm here because Donna makes better coffee than my wife, and my wife knows it and has accepted it." He paused. "Also, Hammer wants you in the living room in 20 minutes, and I'm supposed to make sure you eat first." His words, "Make sure the kid eats first. I've been given a mission." Jake looked at him. Bobby Torres was compact and dark-haired, with a thick mustache and eyes that were simultaneously warm and evaluating. The eyes of someone who had learned to read people the same way Jake had learned to read people. Not in a classroom, but in the specific school of needing to know quickly who was safe and who wasn't. "Sit down," Bobby said. "The eggs are almost done, and I promise I'm only going to make you uncomfortable for part of the meal." Jake sat. Donna put a plate in front of him. He ate. Bobby was quiet for approximately 4 minutes, which Jake suspected was a personal record. "Those margin notes," Bobby said. "Here it comes," Donna said, not unkindly, from the counter. "I'm not embarrassing myself. I'm asking an honest question." Bobby looked at Jake. "I've got a kid. He's 14. He hates math. I mean, refuses, shuts down, says it's not for him. And I look at those books of yours, and I see someone who found something in math that I don't know how to explain to my kid. How did that happen for you?" Jake chewed, thinking. "My mom made a deal with me when I was 9, he said. She said she'd teach me one new word from the dictionary every day if I'd show her one math problem I thought was interesting. Not one I'd solved, one I found interesting." He paused. "I'd never thought about math as something that could be interesting. I just thought it was something you got right or wrong. But when she asked me that, I started looking for the interesting part. And once you find it, you can't unfind it." Bobby stared at him. Huh. He sat back. "That's what I've been doing wrong. I keep asking him if he got it right." "Most people do," Jake said. Bobby pointed at him. "You should be a teacher." "I'm going to be an engineer," Jake said, and the specific, quiet certainty in his voice when he said it, not hope, not wish, but certainty, made Donna Williams turn away to the window for a moment with her hand pressed to the front of her shirt. Just briefly, just for a second. 20 minutes later, Jake walked into the living room. Hammer was there, but so were 4 other men he didn't know. Club members, Jake assessed immediately, from the way they carried themselves and the way they positioned around the room. His whole body tensed. Hammer saw it. "Easy," he said, and to the men, "Give us the room." They went without argument. Hammer pointed to the couch. "Sit down. I want to show you something." Jake sat. Hammer set a laptop on the coffee table, turned it to face Jake, and pressed play. It was a video from a security camera in the parking garage. The timestamp read 9:47 p.m., previous night. The angle covered most of the 3rd level, and what Jake watched, for the first time, was himself. He had not seen it from the outside before. He had only known it from inside. The calculations, the reads, the specific cold clarity that descended on him when there was no other option. From the outside, it looked different. From the outside, it looked like a 17-year-old kid stepping out of the shadows to face three men twice his size, with a kind of absolute calm that did not come from training alone. It came from something else, from the specific decision made in a fraction of a second that another person's safety mattered more than his own. The video ended. Jake looked at the blank screen. "I've shown that to 11 men in the last 12 hours, Hammer said. Every one of them asked me the same question. They asked what that kid's story was." He paused. "I want to tell them, and I want your permission to do that." Jake looked at him. "Why do you need my permission?" "Because it's your story," Hammer said, "not mine." The room was quiet. Jake's hands were clasped between his knees, and he was thinking about the space between privacy and help, about the wall he had built around his own life, and the very specific cost of taking any part of it down. Every time he had let someone see his circumstances before, it had ended one of two ways, with a clipboard or with pity, neither of which changed anything. "What do you want to tell them?" he asked. "The truth. 17 years old, 4.0, accepted to MIT, can't afford to go, needs $15,000 to get through the first year while his financial aid appeal is processing." Hammer's voice was direct and even. "That's it. No orphan story, no sympathy play, just the facts." "And then what?" "And then I asked them if they want to be part of doing something that matters." Jake looked at the laptop. He looked at the frozen last frame of the video, his own back walking away into the dark, shoulders set under the weight of the backpack, already gone. "They don't know me," he said. "They know what you did," Hammer said. "In my experience, that's enough." Another silence. Jake exhaled slowly through his nose. "If I say yes," he said, "I need one condition." "Name it." "I pay it back. Every dollar. When I'm working, however long it takes, I pay it back. Not to you, to the next kid who needs it." He met Hammer's eyes. "I'm not taking charity. I'm taking a loan from people who believe in something, and I need that to mean something on both ends." Hammer looked at him for a long moment. Something in his face shifted. Not surprise exactly, but the expression of a man whose already high expectations have just been exceeded by a margin he wasn't prepared for. "Deal," he said. He put his hand out. Jake shook it. That afternoon, 12 Hells Angels sat in Bobby Torres's garage around a folding table, and Hammer played the video once, and then he told them the facts. 17 years old, MIT, $15,000. And he did not editorialize, and he did not dramatize, because with a story like this, the facts were already everything. The room was quiet when he finished. Then Ray Delgado said, "I got 500 right now." Then Bobby Torres said, "I can do 8. And then it went around the table, and it went fast. The way things go fast when people are not calculating whether to give, but only how much. And Jake sat in the corner of that garage with his backpack on his lap and watched 12 men he had never met pull out wallets and phones and make calls to bank accounts. And by the time it was done, the number on the notepad in front of Hammer was $11,200, which was not $15,000. Jake was already doing the arithmetic, already recalculating, already rerouting to the backup plan in his head when Hammer's phone rang. Hammer looked at the screen. His eyebrows moved, just slightly. He answered it and said almost nothing, just listened, said yes twice, said, "I'll tell him," and hung up. The room was watching him. "That was Detective Reyes," Hammer said slowly. He looked at Jake. "Your appeal came through." Nobody breathed. "They approved the full financial aid package," Hammer said. "Tuition, room, board, full ride." He paused, and his voice, which had been steady through everything, was not entirely steady now. "She said the committee noted in their decision that the documentation was, her words, the most thorough and articulate appeal this office has received in 11 years. Jake did not move. He sat completely still in the corner of that garage, and the $11,200 was on the table in front of Hammer, and the full scholarship was on the phone, and 3 years of holding everything together with nothing but mathematics and stubbornness and the memory of his mother's voice was standing right there in the room with him. And the wall that he had built to keep himself from wanting things too much was taking a hit it had not been designed to survive. Bobby Torres said very quietly, "Kid." Jake pressed both hands flat on his thighs. He stared at the concrete floor of the garage. His jaw was tight. His chest was tight. Everything was tight, all at once. The way things get right before they let go. "Hey," Hammer said, his voice dropping to something private, something meant only for Jake. "You did that, not us. You wrote those 12 pages. You documented every single thing. You mailed it certified." He leaned forward. "You did that." Jake looked up. His eyes were very bright. He blinked once, twice, 3 times, and then he said, in a voice that came out slightly rougher than usual, "I told her not to waste the waiting." "Who?" Bobby asked. "My mom." He cleared his throat. He straightened his spine. "She told me not to waste the waiting." Ray Delgado, who was not by any measure a soft man, looked at the ceiling. Bobby Torres suddenly became very interested in something on the floor. Hammer held Jake's gaze and did not look away, because this boy had carried everything alone for too long, and the least anyone could do was look him in the eye when the weight finally started to lift. "So," Hammer said after a moment, "the scholarship covers tuition and housing. That leaves first month's expenses, transportation, books, the small things." He looked at the notepad. $11,200 says you don't have to worry about any of it. That money should go back to the club." "The club voted," Bobby said, looking up from the floor. "Unanimous. Before you say another word." Jake opened his mouth, closed it. "There's one more thing," Hammer said. He reached into the chest pocket of his flannel shirt and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He set it on the table and slid it across to Jake. "Bobby and I put together the paperwork this morning. The Iron Cross Education Fund. Non-profit status applied for. It's going to support homeless students in this county, emergency funds, housing assistance, academic resources." He paused. "We'd like you to be on the board, not as a figurehead, as a founder. When you're ready, when you're settled." His voice was careful. "We're not asking you to take on more weight. We're asking you to help build something so the next kid doesn't have to carry it alone." Jake looked at the paper. He read it carefully, all the way through, the way he read everything, thoroughly, completely, not skipping a word. When he looked up, his expression was the most open it had been since Lily had grabbed his sleeve in the parking garage 2 nights ago. "You did all this in one morning," he said. "Bobby drinks a lot of coffee when he's motivated," Hammer said. "I do," Bobby confirmed. "I'm not proud of how much coffee I drank this morning." Jake almost smiled. It was a real almost. The corner of his mouth moved, and something behind his eyes shifted. And for just a moment you could see the person he was going to be when the world had given him enough room to become it. "Okay," he said, for the 3rd time in 2 days. And this time when he said it, it didn't cost him anything. This time it felt like the beginning of something instead of the surrender to it. This time the word landed differently, the way words land when you say them from solid ground, instead of from the edge of something you're afraid to fall off. Outside, the city was doing what cities always do, moving, indifferent, full of its own 10,000 dramas. But in Bobby Torres's garage, around a folding table covered in wallets and notebooks, and a laptop with a frozen security camera image on its screen, something had been decided. 12 men and a 17-year-old boy, and one folded piece of paper that said, in plain legal language, that the next kid would not have to do this alone. Jake Reynolds put the paper in his backpack. He put it in the same pocket as the acceptance letter and the photograph and Detective Reyes's card. He zipped it closed, and for the first time in 18 months, the backpack felt lighter. 3 weeks later, Jake Reynolds turned 18 in the Williams house. He did not announce it. He had not announced it in any of the previous 3 years either. Birthdays had become logistical markers for him, not celebrations, just the date on a calendar that meant something changed in a legal document somewhere. But Lily had found out from Detective Reyes, who had found out from the foster care records she had no business accessing, but had accessed anyway. And at 7 in the morning, Jake walked into the kitchen and found a cake on the table and 6 people standing around it who did not know him a month ago and were now looking at him like he had always belonged in this room. He stopped in the doorway. Bobby Torres was there, holding a coffee mug and looking slightly embarrassed about the streamers Ray Delgado had apparently insisted on hanging from the cabinet handles. Ray was standing next to Carol from under the Greenway overpass, who was wearing a clean sweater Jake had never seen before, and her glasses frames pushed up on her forehead as always, and an expression on her face that was trying to be casual and failing completely. Donna Williams was next to the cake with a lighter in her hand. Lily was next to her mother, and Hammer was at the back of the kitchen with his arms crossed and his gray eyes doing that thing they did where they were watching everything at once, but the only thing they were actually focused on was Jake. Nobody said surprise. Nobody made it theatrical. Lily just said, "Sit down. Donna made the cake from scratch, and you're going to eat a piece, even if you have to force it." Jake sat down. He ate a piece of cake. He did not say much because he could not trust his voice entirely, and everyone in that kitchen understood that, and nobody pushed. Carol sat beside him while Donna cut the second round and said, quietly, close to his ear, "Your mom would have thought this was completely excessive, and she would have loved every second of it." Jake looked at her. "How do you know that?" "Because you described her to me for 6 months under an overpass," Carol said, "and I know exactly who she was." She patted his hand once, briskly, the way librarians pat things when they mean business. "Now eat your cake." He ate his cake. Afterward, when the kitchen was clearing and Bobby was washing dishes with the loud, cheerful inefficiency of a man who volunteers for tasks he isn't good at, Hammer said, "Walk with me." They went to the garage, Hammer's space, the one with the Harley on the stand and the workbench along the wall, and the particular smell of oil and metal that Jake had come to associate with the man over the past 3 weeks in a way that felt, uncomfortably and then comfortably, like the smell of somewhere safe. Hammer leaned against the workbench. Jake stood with his hands in his jacket pockets. "You leave in 9 days, Hammer said. "Yes." "Transportation's arranged. Bobby's driving you. Non-negotiable. He already told his wife, and once Bobby tells his wife something, it is structurally impossible to undo." Jake almost smiled. "I wasn't going to argue." "You were going to argue," Hammer said. "You argue every time someone tries to do something practical for you. You've gotten better about it, but you still do it." He said it without judgment, just as fact, the way he said most things. "The Iron Cross Fund paperwork came back from the state. We're official. Non-profit status granted." He paused. "We already have 3 applications." Jake looked up. 3? Word gets around. Hammer's voice was level, but his eyes weren't. Jefferson High guidance counselor reached out. Apparently there are 2 students currently couch surfing whose situations she's been worried about for a year and didn't have anything to point them toward. She called us the day after the story ran. "What story?" Hammer was quiet for half a second, just half a second, but Jake caught it. "What story?" Jake said again, and this time it wasn't a question. Hammer reached to the workbench behind him and picked up a folded newspaper. He set it on the bench beside him without handing it over. "Local paper," he said. "The reporter has been trying to reach you for 2 weeks. I told her you needed time. She agreed to wait. The story ran yesterday." He paused. "I should have told you sooner." Jake's jaw tightened. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing she didn't already have from public records and from Reyes. I didn't give her anything personal, Jake. Not your mother, not the foster care, Nothing that belonged only to you. His voice was steady and direct. I told her about the fund. I told her about MIT. I confirmed that you were real, and that what happened in the garage was real, and that this was a story worth telling. He held Jake's gaze. Because it is. And because sometimes the things that are worth telling publicly. Because they make other people believe something is possible. Jake stood still. He was doing the thing he always did when something hit him sideways. Going very quiet, processing at speed, assembling the information and its implications like a proof, checking for flaws in the logic, looking for where it could hurt him. How many applications did you say? He said finally. 3, Hammer said, in one day. Jake looked at the newspaper. He reached out and picked it up and unfolded it. And there was the headline, and there was the still from the security camera. Grainy, the boy in the gray hoodie, a shape more than a face. One hand on the backpack strap, already turning toward the shadows. And under it, 4 column inches that he read in approximately 45 seconds. He folded it back up. He set it down. I want to talk to the guidance counselor, he said, before I leave, about the 2 students. His voice was back to its normal register, flat and certain and moving forward. I want to know their specific situations. Financial need, academic standing, what the gaps are. I can help structure the applications before I go. Hammer looked at him for a long moment. Jake, I have 9 days. You also have cracked ribs that still aren't fully healed, and a bedroom full of MIT orientation materials that you have touched exactly twice, and a mother who is not here, but who I am absolutely certain would have something to say about you spending your last 9 days in this city doing other people's paperwork instead of your own. Jake met his eyes. The paperwork is the point, he said quietly. That's the whole point, isn't it? The paperwork, the application, the 12 pages, that's what gets you through. If I know how to do that, and those 2 kids don't, and I have 9 days. He stopped. His voice was even, but underneath it was a current of something fierce and old. The accumulated weight of every form he had ever filed alone, every appeal he had ever written by flashlight, every system he had navigated without anyone beside him who knew how it worked. Nobody showed me, he said. Nobody sat down with me and said, here is how this works. Here is what they need to see. Here is the language that opens doors. I figured it out myself, and it took 3 years, and I almost missed the window entirely. He looked at Hammer. I have 9 days, and I know how. That's enough. The garage was quiet. Hammer uncrossed his arms and put both hands flat on the workbench. He looked at the floor. When he looked back up, something in his face was different, fuller somehow, in a way that was hard to name. All right, he said. Tomorrow, I'll call the counselor tonight. Jake nodded. Thank you. Stop thanking me. You keep doing things that merit it. Then we're stuck in a loop, Hammer said, and the corner of his mouth moved, and Jake's did too. And for a moment, the garage was warm with something neither of them would have described out loud, but both of them knew the shape of. The counselor's name was Ms. Patricia Holt, and she had been at Jefferson High for 19 years, and she was the kind of woman who kept files on students long after the system said she was supposed to close them, because the system was wrong about when you stopped needing to be watched out for. She sat across from Jake at a table in the school library on a Saturday morning with 2 folders in front of her and the careful, assessing expression of someone deciding how much to trust. She decided quickly. Something about the way Jake opened his notebook and asked his first question, specific, technical, about documentation requirements for emergency housing assistance, told her everything she needed to know about who she was dealing with. She opened the first folder. The student's name was Marcus, 16 years old, couch surfing between 3 different households since his mother's eviction in August. 3.8 GPA, wanted to study electrical engineering, had not told a single teacher about his situation because he was afraid of what would happen if the wrong person found out. Jake read the file. He asked 4 questions. He wrote 6 lines of notes. He said, "This one is straightforward. Emergency Housing Fund covers the gap. We document the academic record and the extenuating circumstances. The application goes in this week." He needs someone to sit with him while he writes his personal statement. It'll take 2 hours. He looked up. Who does he trust? Ms. Holt blinked. His chemistry teacher, I think, Mr. Patterson. Can you get Mr. Patterson in a room with Marcus and a laptop on Monday? Yes. I'll write them a guide, step by step, what to say and how to say it. I'll have it ready by Sunday night. He moved to the second folder. What about this one? The second student was a girl named Deja, 17, sleeping in her aunt's storage unit 3 nights a week and the school library the other nights. She had a key because a janitor had left one hanging on a hook by the side door, and she had taken it and replaced it every morning, and nobody had noticed for 2 months. Her grades were inconsistent, which Ms. Holt said immediately, and Jake said, just as immediately, "That's not a character issue. That's a stability issue. Show me the progression." He looked at the grade history. The pattern was exactly what he expected. Strong in every subject during the weeks when she had a consistent place to sleep, dropping off sharply during the periods of instability. "She's not inconsistent," he said. "She's navigating. There's a difference." He looked at Ms. Holt. "Does she know about the fund?" "Not yet. Can you bring her in today?" Ms. Holt sat back in her chair and looked at Jake Reynolds with an expression he didn't entirely know how to interpret. It was somewhere between professional admiration and something more personal, something that had to do with the specific grief of watching a child struggle alone, and then watching another child who had been through the same thing walk into a room and immediately, instinctively, turn toward the one who needed help. "I can call her right now," Ms. Holt said. Deja arrived 40 minutes later, suspicious and closed in the way that people are closed when they have learned that openness costs more than they can afford. She sat down across from Jake with her arms crossed and her eyes moving around the room, calculating, and Jake recognized every single thing about that posture because he had worn it himself every day for 3 years. He did not do the thing adults always did, which was immediately try to make her comfortable by telling her everything was going to be okay. He just opened his notebook and said, "I'm Jake. I graduated from Jefferson in June. I'm going to MIT in 9 days. For the last 18 months, I've been sleeping in a parking garage on Clement Street." He said it the way he said everything, evenly, without drama or self-pity. "Tell me what you need." Deja stared at him. "I have your grade history," he continued. "You're not inconsistent. You're actually extremely consistent when your housing is stable. What I need to know is what your priorities are, what you want after this, not what you're settling for." She uncrossed her arms. "Architecture," she said. It came out quietly, like something she hadn't said out loud in a long time. "I want to study architecture." "Good," Jake said. "Write that down." He pushed the notebook toward her. "Write it in your own handwriting, right now, because that's the first sentence of your application." She picked up the pen. She wrote it. And then she looked at what she had written on the page, and something in her face cracked open, just slightly, just at the edges, the way things crack open when you see a piece of yourself made real and permanent on paper, and realize that it is not, after all, a thing that can be taken away. Jake spent 4 hours in that library on Saturday and 3 hours on Sunday writing documentation guides and reviewing application drafts and making sure that every form was filled out correctly and every deadline was noted in 2 places. He did it efficiently and without fanfare. And when Ms. Holt said, at the end of Sunday afternoon, "Jake, you didn't have to do all of this," he said, "I know," and meant it completely. On the morning of his 9th day, Bobby Torres loaded the last of Jake's boxes into the back of the truck. There was not much. There never had been. A box of books, the MIT textbooks he had received in a package from the university's resource office, paid for by the Iron Cross Fund, each one new and unread, in waiting. A duffel bag of clothes that Donna had quietly supplemented over 3 weeks with practical things: warm socks, a good rain jacket, a pair of real winter boots, without ever making a production of it. The backpack, of course, always the backpack, on his back as it had always been, but lighter now in the way that things are lighter when what they contain has changed. The club was there, all 12 of them, plus Carol, who had taken a bus from the Greenway, and Detective Reyes, who was technically off duty and was wearing a jacket instead of her vest, and trying to look casual about being there, which she wasn't. Ms. Holt was there, Mr. Patterson from the chemistry class, who had heard the story through the school and had come because, he said, he had had Jake Reynolds in his class for 9 months and had apparently failed completely to understand who he was sitting in the 3rd row, and he wanted to remedy that, starting now. Jake stood by the truck and looked at all of these people, and the feeling that moved through him was not something he had language for, and had never expected to need language for. And so he stood with it without naming it, and let it be as large as it actually was. Hammer walked up to him last. He put a hand on Jake's shoulder, solid, brief, the way men like him communicated things they wouldn't say in front of a crowd. "You call," Hammer said. "Not when things are bad. Call whenever. You call on a Tuesday because something interesting happened in your engineering class. You call on a Sunday because you ate something strange in the dining hall. You call because you are a person who belongs to people now, and that's what people do." Jake looked at him. His throat moved. "I know you're going to be fine," Hammer continued, quieter now, meant for Jake only. "I've known it since I saw those margin notes. But fine isn't the same as not alone, and you have spent too long confusing the two." He squeezed Jake's shoulder once and let go. "Don't waste the waiting, kid." Jake's breath caught. "She would have liked you," he said. Hammer's jaw worked. He nodded once. "High praise," he said. "I'll take it." Bobby Torres honked the truck horn from the driver's seat with the subtlety of a man who has exactly none. "Some of us have a 6-hour drive and a wife who made me promise to be back for dinner," he called out. "Let's move." Jake turned to the assembled crowd. He was not a speech-making person, and everyone there knew it, which was why the fact that he said anything at all made every person go still. "3 weeks ago," he said, "I was in a parking garage trying to get from one night to the next. That was the whole plan. Next night, next morning, next bus, next library hour, next page of the problem set." He paused. "I want you to understand something. The plan was always MIT. The plan was always more than surviving. I never stopped believing I was going to get there." He looked around at all of them. Bobby, Ray, Carol, Lily, Donna, Ms. Holt, Detective Reyes, all of them. "But believing you're going to get somewhere and knowing there are people who believe it with you, those are not the same thing. And I didn't know what the second one felt like until now." His voice was steady and quiet and completely without performance. "So, thank you, all of you, not for saving me, I was working on that myself, for showing up while I was working on it. That's the thing. That's all it takes. Just show up." Nobody said anything for a moment. Carol put her glasses on, which was something she only did when she was trying to look like she wasn't crying. Ray Delgado looked at the sky. Lily Williams grabbed her mother's hand. Jake picked up his backpack. He got in the truck. Bobby pulled out of the driveway. For the first block, Jake looked straight ahead. For the second block, he reached into the front pocket of his backpack and took out the photograph. His mother, young, at a kitchen table, laughing at something outside the frame, completely unaware of the camera, completely alive. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he said quietly, to no one in particular, "I'm going." Bobby Torres, who had heard everything and said nothing, reached over and turned on the radio. Something classic came through the speakers, low and steady, and the city moved past the windows, and the highway opened up ahead of them, and Jake Reynolds rode toward the life he had promised his mother he would build. Not saved, not rescued, not given anything he hadn't earned, but no longer alone in the building of it. He had walked into a parking garage on a Tuesday night with everything he owned on his back and nothing waiting for him on the other end. He had stepped out of the shadows for a girl he didn't know because it was the only thing that made sense. He had asked for nothing and held his ground and bled on concrete and walked away without his name. And somehow, through one girl's gratitude, one father's loyalty, one detective's decency, one old librarian's company, and 12 men who understood what it meant to have nothing and keep going anyway, the world had rearranged itself around that single act of courage and given him exactly what he had been earning all along. He was 17 when he stepped out of those shadows. He was 18 when he drove away from them. The difference between those two numbers was not a year. It was the difference between surviving alone and building something with people who showed up. And that difference, as it turned out, was everything. The highway stretched out long and clean and entirely possible in front of him. And Jake Reynolds, who had never wasted a day of waiting in his life, pressed his back against the seat, felt the road under the wheels, and began.